Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of truth, students of history, and those who strive to understand the complexities of leadership and conflict. Today, we delve into the story of a figure whose name is both feared and revered in different parts of the world. A man who stands at the intersection of power, struggle, and ideology. His name is Yahya Sinwar, a prominent leader of Hamas, the political and militant group based in the Gaza Strip. The story of Yahya Sinwar is not just a tale of one man. It's the embodiment of the broader Palestinian struggle for self-determination, a reflection of decades of conflict, and a study in leadership that transcends borders, igniting passions and sparking debates across the globe. Yahya Sinwar's rise to power within Hamas is emblematic of the long and difficult journey of the Palestinian people. He has become one of the most influential figures in a movement that has consistently faced immense challenges, military, political, and humanitarian. Whether you see him as a champion of resistance or as a symbol of violence, one thing is certain. His story, and the path he has taken to leadership, is one filled with determination, conviction, and an unwavering commitment to a cause he believes in. The early years, shaped by conflict. To understand Yahya Sinwar, we must first understand the environment in which he was shaped. Born in 1958 in the Khan Yunis refugee camp in the Gaza Strip, Sinwar's formative years were deeply influenced by the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The displacement of Palestinians following the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 had left millions of Palestinians as refugees, and Gaza was one of the most densely populated areas, teeming with those who had been displaced from their homes. In the refugee camps of Gaza, Sinwar grew up surrounded by poverty, violence, and a deep sense of loss. The longing for a homeland, the desire to reclaim what was taken, and the constant presence of occupation forces formed the backdrop of his youth. This environment shaped his worldview, fueling a sense of resistance and a desire to fight for the rights of his people. It was a crucible of hardship that forged in him a fierce determination to challenge the status quo. By the time Sinwar was a young man, the seeds of resistance were already planted. He became politically active, joining the ranks of Hamas, a movement that was born during the First Intifada in 1987. The Intifada, or uprising, was a period of intense Palestinian resistance against Israeli military occupation in the West Bank and Gaza. It was during this period that Sinwar first emerged as a leader, advocating for armed struggle and the use of force to achieve Palestinian independence. The founding of Hamas and the rise of Sinwar. Hamas, the organization with which Sinwar would become synonymous, was founded as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. Its goal was clear from the outset: to resist Israeli occupation and to establish an Islamic state in all of historic Palestine. While other Palestinian factions, such as the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, led by Yasser Arafat, sought diplomatic and political solutions to the conflict, Hamas took a different approach, one that prioritized armed resistance and rejected compromise with Israel. Sinwar quickly rose through the ranks of Hamas, becoming one of its most prominent leaders in the Gaza Strip. His leadership style was marked by a combination of pragmatism and hardline ideology. He was a man who understood the power of both diplomacy and force, and he was unafraid to use violence to achieve his objectives. Sinwar's early years in Hamas were characterized by his role in organizing militant cells and directing attacks against Israeli targets, actions that earned him both support from Palestinians who saw him as a defender of their rights and condemnation from Israel and its allies. In 1989, Yahya Sinwar was arrested by Israeli forces and sentenced to life in prison for his involvement in the killings of Palestinians suspected of collaborating with Israel. For many, this was the end of the road, but for Sinwar, it was merely the beginning of a new chapter in his journey. The prison years, a time of reflection and influence. Sinwar spent over 2 decades in Israeli prisons, and it was during these years that his influence within Hamas grew even stronger. Prison, for Sinwar, was not just a place of confinement. It was a place of learning, networking, and consolidation of power. He became a key figure among the Hamas prisoners, advocating for unity and discipline within the movement's ranks. While in prison, Sinwar's reputation as a steadfast leader solidified. He was known for his ability to command respect and loyalty from his fellow inmates, and his strategic thinking earned him a place among the top leadership of Hamas, even while behind bars. His years in prison also deepened his ideological commitment to the armed struggle, and he emerged as one of the most uncompromising voices within Hamas. In 2011, Sinwar's life took a dramatic turn when he was released as part of a prisoner swap between Israel and Hamas. In exchange for the release of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, Israel agreed to release over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, including Yahya Sinwar. His release was met with jubilation in Gaza, where he was hailed as a hero of the resistance. But for Sinwar, the fight was far from over. Leadership in Gaza, a new era for Hamas. After his release, Sinwar quickly re-established himself as a dominant figure within Hamas. In 2017, he was elected as the head of Hamas political bureau in Gaza, solidifying his control over the movement's military and political wings. This was a pivotal moment for both Sinwar and Hamas. Under his leadership, Hamas adopted a more pragmatic approach to governance, balancing its militant activities with efforts to maintain internal stability and manage relations with external actors such as Egypt, Qatar, and Iran. Sinwar's leadership in Gaza has been defined by his ability to navigate the complexities of running a de facto government while continuing to resist Israeli occupation. The Gaza Strip, home to over 2 million people, remains under an Israeli blockade that severely restricts the movement of goods and people. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is dire, with widespread poverty, unemployment, and limited access to basic services. For Sinwar, managing this situation has required a careful balancing act, providing for the needs of the population while maintaining the legitimacy of Hamas as a resistance movement. Under Sinwar's leadership, Hamas is also engaged in several rounds of conflict with Israel. These conflicts have been marked by the use of rockets, tunnels, and other asymmetric tactics, which Hamas has used to challenge the far superior military capabilities of Israel. The most recent major conflict, in May 2021, saw intense fighting between Israel and Hamas, resulting in significant casualties on both sides and widespread destruction in Gaza. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, Sinwar has remained resolute in his belief that resistance is the only path to Palestinian liberation. For him, every rocket fired, every tunnel dug, and every act of defiance is part of a larger strategy to pressure Israel and to assert Palestinian rights on the world stage. The dichotomy of leadership, visionary or villain. To his supporters, Yahya Sinwar is a visionary leader, a man who has dedicated his life to the Palestinian cause and who has sacrificed everything for the dream of a free Palestine. They see him as a symbol of resistance, someone who refuses to back down in the face of overwhelming adversity. For many Palestinians, especially those in Gaza, Sinwar's leadership is a source of pride. He has fought not only for their survival but also for their dignity, refusing to accept a future defined by occupation and subjugation. However, to his critics, Sinwar is a dangerous militant, a leader who perpetuates violence and holds the people of Gaza hostage to his ideology. They point to the countless lives lost in the conflicts between Hamas and Israel, the destruction of Gaza's infrastructure, and the dire humanitarian situation that has resulted from years of conflict. For Israel and many in the international community, Sinwar represents the hard-line face of Hamas, a leader who prioritizes war over peace and who is unwilling to engage in meaningful negotiations. The complexity of Yahya Sinwar's legacy. The legacy of Yahya Sinwar is complex and multifaceted. He is a man shaped by conflict, who has risen to power in one of the most volatile and contentious regions in the world. His leadership of Hamas reflects the broader struggle of the Palestinian people, a people who have lived under occupation, faced displacement, and endured decades of violence. Sinwar's story forces us to grapple with difficult questions about leadership, resistance, and the cost of conflict. Is he a hero, fighting for the freedom of his people? Or is he a villain, perpetuating a cycle of violence that brings more suffering to Palestinians and Israelis alike? The answer, perhaps, depends on where you stand in this long and tragic conflict. What we can say for certain is that Yahya Sinwar's impact on the Palestinian struggle, on the region, and on the world is undeniable. His leadership has shaped the trajectory of Hamas, influenced the course of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and raised profound questions about the future of peace in the region. A call for reflection and understanding. As we reflect on the life and leadership of Yahya Sinwar, let us remember that leadership is never simple, especially in a context as fraught and complex as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Sinwar's story is one of conviction, of unwavering belief in a cause. But it is also a story of a region torn apart by war, where every decision comes with profound consequences. In the end, the story of Yahya Sinwar is not just his own. It is the story of a people fighting for their identity, their land, and their future. It is a story of resistance, of sacrifice, and of a deep yearning for freedom. Whether you see him as a hero or a villain, his journey challenges us to think critically about leadership in times of conflict and to seek a deeper understanding of the forces that shape our world.